I want freedom.
Yeah.
And how can you be freedom when you're trapped to your business? It doesn't make any sense. And I think a lot of people, because they don't hire the right staff, they're like, oh, well, they can't do it. And I'm like, well, no, you have to put the faith in them that they can do it, first of all. If you tell them that they can't, no, they're never going to be able to. And then it's just letting go of that control. Leadership truly does come from the top. And when that leader is just causing chaos or they don't believe in their staff, everything just falls apart. And so that's why I think team meetings are so important, putting the faith in your staff and showing my clients that I value my staff too. If you have pushback from somebody right away or their attitude, then it's not going to work. You want them to be able to follow you as the leader. And it doesn't mean that I'm making all the right decisions, but if they can't even learn from the very beginning, you know what? If you're not bringing value to my business and my staff does, you're not bringing value to my staff either, you got to let them go early.
What's going on, and welcome back to the Wellness Business Secrets podcast. My name is Josh. I am your host, and I am so pumped for the episode that we have for you today. If you are a newer business owner, if you are someone that is maybe struggling a little bit with team and culture and getting people just to perform at a high level and love your business just as much as you do, then I think you're going to enjoy this episode. So we are on with Jenessa Mckray. She is the owner of Frisco Body Contouring and Weight Loss, and her journey is definitely something special. She is a newer business owner, but you would not believe it when you hear her talk. And so I'm excited for you to be able to tune in, listen to this one, or watch it and get some value from it. All right, guys, let's jump into it. You have a pretty interesting story of where you come from, because essentially you are your client.
I am my client, that's for sure.
I think that's sometimes some of the best business owners, because who can speak better to your client than the person that's already walked in their shoes? And you have that. Talk to us about that. Like, talk to us about your story, kind of back in college where things really started for you, and just take us through kind of your transformation that you went through and what caused you to even be the crazy entrepreneur of like, I'm going to open up a business.
So I was a college athlete, but I've always just struggled with weight, even before college. Like, I've always had love handles, right? So I'd fluctuate, I'd go up in my weight, I'd go down. My mom, I'll never forget, she would always be like, you're not fat, you're just big boned. So that was the story I would tell in my head. I'm never going to be like those skinny girls. I'm just always big boned. But really, it was like I was fat. Your parents love you for who you are, but she put that story in my head, and again and again and again, I'd be like, well, I'm not fat, I'm just big boned, but I'll never be skinny. And so I think that played a huge role looking back at it. And so I'd work out, I'd do 2-a-days, I'd stress over what I was eating, I'd meal prep all the time, and then I'd still I'd get down to where I was, but then I'd still have love handles, because I think genetically you just carry weight where you're going to carry weight, and I never wanted to have surgery. I went to someplace in South Lake and I did a diet. It actually worked, and then they had a red light there, and the red light actually started to shrink my fat and my love handles, and I was like, man, I think I could make this work as a business, because the chiropractors that owned it weren't there. That's ultimately, I think, as a business owner, we get stuck in the business, and I'm like, I don't want to be in the business.
Yeah.
So anyways, so then I started with a little red light in a salon suite. It worked. People were getting results, but people wanted results yesterday. So I was like, how can I get people results yesterday? Because we're just an impatient society. So then I added the iCoon, which nobody has in Texas. I flew to New York, and it was like that one machine that you could get results the same day. So then I was like, what if I combine the red light with the iCoon? Because as a nurse practitioner and working in the ER, you just have this mind where you want to think outside the box. So I was like, what if I combine those two? And then I saw people getting results really quick. And then I was like, man, what if I combined a laser with that? So now we just stack treatments upon each other. But that's really ultimately, it was just because I didn't want surgery. I've always had body issues. And now people look at me and they don't believe that I was ever fat. And I was like, dude, I was over 200 pounds as a college athlete. Because I went from 165 to just 200 in a couple months. And then I just battled it.
A lot of people go out, they do a treatment, they have success, but they don't necessarily then go, I'm going to make a business out of this. I'm going to fly to New York, look at these products, do this. What's kind of going on in your brain at that time that's making you think that way?
My mom was a realtor.
Okay.
So I think I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? I didn't really know what my passion was. I worked for a neurosurgeon for 7 years. That was not easy. I learned a lot. He was a great guy, but definitely very, very difficult. And so when I left him, I went in to try to do the corporate side of it. And he found out I was working for one of his surgery centers. And they told me that they told him they were going to put me as a chief nursing officer, at that facility. And I was like, oh, have you told him? Because not that we ever ended on bad terms, but the egotistical side of it, I was like, I don't think this is going to go well, because essentially I'm going to be his boss when it comes to everything else. And he just lost it. He was like, she doesn't know numbers. She doesn't know money. She's not a hard worker. Completely opposite. We had a really good relationship. But as soon as he felt that, so anyways, I got let go from that. And then I just was like, you know what? Forget this. I never want to work for anybody ever again. And then my wheels just started turning even more.
I think that's where it's at, right? It's like you figure out, deep down there's a little bit of a drive here, right? And sometimes it's from seeing someone do it, like your mom, or maybe you've just seen things that you've wanted, right? And like there's that deep drive that happens, and then usually there's a moment where it's like it's almost like God opens up the door for it, right? Where it's just like, this is your time. And so you're still working in the ER, correct?
Yes, I still work in the ER. Yeah.
How many years ago was it when you started Frisco Body Contouring?
2.5 years almost.
Okay.
We've been in our location. It'll be 2 years this coming May.
A lot of people in this industry, they do come from being a nurse practitioner, or they come from the medical space. Talk to me about that first experience where you're working full-time, now deciding you're going to open up the spot. Walk me through the experience there. Walk me through kind of what that looked like, still working full-time, but then starting your business.
I started in a little salon suite, and I was like, okay. And then I started with the red light. I think the payment was like $700, and then the rent for the space was like $13 or $14. I'm like, okay, $2,000 a month. If I can cover that, I mean, worst case, I'm going to break even, which you really shouldn't think when you're going into it as a business owner. Now looking back, I'm like, man, I should have just gone all in. Like even my space now, I'm like I've only financed everything. I've never taken out a big loan. Slowly, we've been adding to our brand. But I just did it on a whim. I'm like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And then I was like, shit, it's working. People are buying packages in this little salon suite. I have clients still that started in a little salon suite, and they're still with me. Like, I have a husband and wife, and he always tells my girls, I knew her when she wasn't big. I'm like, Mike, I'm not big now. But he's like, I knew her when she was nothing in a little salon suite, and they've still been with me. So it just... I mean, it's pretty awesome to see that.
And was it a one-woman show at first? Was it you doing everything, selling everything, doing the fulfillment?
No, because I tried to take myself out as soon as I could, actually, to be honest with you. Since I was still pretty much working full-time, my supervisor physician, his daughter, who was like 23, 24 at the time, needed a job, so she was there. So I hired her right away, and then she would be there, and then I would come in and out, kind of like I do now with my spot.
You said you were thinking about not like taking yourself out from the beginning. A lot of people don't think like that at first in the business. Usually they get into the business, it's years later, they're overwhelmed, they're doing everything themselves, and they're kind of trapped in their own little prison of their business. What made you think that way?
Because of everybody I've heard to be their own prisoners in their business, and I'm like, why start a business then? Like, I remember I talked to one of my friends who's a business owner. She's like, oh, don't do it. Don't do it. You'll always be stuck in it. And I was like, really? I don't think that's necessarily true, though. And so instead of listening to her and being like, oh my gosh, I'm always going to get stuck, it's almost like I completely did the opposite. And I was like, I'm going to take myself out. So even on Instagram and social media, you don't see me a lot. If you're the space, because even now, like if they figure out I'm a nurse practitioner, they figure out it's me, they want to see me all the time. And so I immediately am like, well, hey, girls, what do you think? Like, I put it off on them. But I don't know. I've just seen so many people drowned in their business, and then they don't have the freedom. And I heard so many stories. I was like, I don't want to be that.
I think that's important to, when you're starting to know, like, think out, right? Like, don't just think in the moment, but think out of, like, what do you personally want your life to look like?
Yeah, and I want freedom.
Yeah.
And how can you be freedom when you're trapped to your business? It doesn't make any sense. And I think a lot of people, because they don't hire the right staff, or they're like, oh, well, they can't do it. And I'm like, well, no, you have to put the faith in them that they can do it, first of all. If you tell them that they can't, no, they're never going to be able to. So I think that's a huge thing. And then it's just letting go of that control. And I guess I'm not a big control person.
I think that is one of the biggest reasons why people struggle with that, is the control issue. It's that this person's not going to be able to sell as I can sell. They're not going to take care of the clients. I have to be there. I have to see everything. And so naturally not being a control freak probably helps.
It probably, I think
so. But, are there some tactical things that you did in the beginning, having to start with the staff person, and then you also knowing you have a job that you're still working?
I think it's really just putting the faith in the girls that they can do it, right? They can sell.
Yeah.
I naturally can sell, I think, because I just naturally talk to people. It's something that you don't even realize you do until you're doing it. And so there would be times where I'm like, man, I want to go up there, like, because I know we're short on money, I can sell. But it was like, don't go. Let them do it, and then let's talk about it afterwards about what happened. If I'm there now, like even there was a client there last night, I didn't go try to sell her. I just talked to her. I didn't tell her who I was. I didn't tell her this is my business. I'm the owner. All I did was be like, oh, do you need a glass of water? She's like, no, I'm just trying to decide if I want surgery, if I want to do this? And she's like, I'm just looking at your before and afters. I was like, yeah, I love them because they're real. Surgery and this is two totally different things. You're never going to get the look like what you look with surgery with this. But also, I do this stuff because I don't want surgery. I want to do it all naturally and non-invasive. So it was like I still didn't sell. I let my employee finish the sell and I just kind of walked out. I think it's just putting more trust in your employees and believing personally that they can do it.
There's this concept that I love to talk about of pseudo leadership, and you see it a lot of times in business. And it's where we hire staff for a role and we give them that role, but it's really fake. As soon as there's a problem, then you see the entrepreneur or the owner dive straight in.
Yeah.
And so I think that hits to what you're talking about there, of like that shows that person that the faith isn't there. And if someone doesn't believe that you have faith in them, I think that's where people get stuck, and then they wonder why they don't have a staff that can make decisions, that can execute when they're not there. And we've seen this trends where like you see owners in the location, revenue's up, owners out of the location, revenue's down. And I think that happens is because there's that it's fake leadership. It's like you're putting someone in place in a leadership position to own their role, and everyone's a leader, right? No matter if they're a manager title or not, if you give them a role to own, they're a leader in that role. And a lot of people don't let people actually lead in their role.
It's funny, we just had our team meeting yesterday and we listened to good old Bob Proctor, and I don't know if you know Bob Proctor. But we listened to his definition of leadership. And it was like, in order to be a leader, you have to be a follower at first. And I think people fail to realize that, right? Like, that's why you go to a room and you put yourself with the riches of the rich, because you want to follow them. So everybody in their life is a follower at one point in order to be a leader. So I showed him that because, one, I was like, when we grow and we expand, I want you guys all to be leaders. But right now, obviously, you need to follow, but the goal is to have you be a leader. So putting that into their heads now, while we're just not even in the viability phase, I think that it helps them to get the confidence to be like, shit, I can do this. Like she believes in me. Why don't I have that belief in myself?
And I've seen that because, when we first met, there were several comments you made, and like you just see someone who's interested in developing their staff. I think you just came back from Arizona, actually, from an event with one of your staff members that you took. This concept of developing your staff, it seems like it comes natural to you in a way, or you just think that's the way business should be done, but it's very rare that you see people developing their brick and mortar staff.
I think it came probably a lot from sports. And I saw my coaches and they all tried to coach you the same. But I don't think that sometimes you can't coach everybody the same. And I think that comes with staff too. I mean, you're growing a team essentially. And so if you don't have that team camaraderie, and also I think it came from the neurosurgeon. I do think that leadership starts from the top, right?
Yep.
And I saw the chaos he caused, and it was just ultimate chaos. Like, nobody was ever happy. And you just realize that leadership truly does come from the top. And when that leader is just causing chaos, or they don't believe in their staff, everything just falls apart. And so that's why I think team meetings are so important, putting the faith in your staff and showing my clients that I value my staff too. Like, I have one client, she's been with me for a very long time, and she was like, I want Jenessa to do all my treatments. And I was like, I can't do that. I was like, my staff they're awesome. I've trained them well. And it's almost like where I would lose her, even though she's been a great, great client and she's helped my business along the way, but my staff are more important.
I'm smiling because I love tactical, and that is tactical because those are the real issues that people see, right? What do you do with the client who's coming in demanding that they have to have your time, right? It has to be you. If it's not you, I'm gone. And how you approach that situation is how I recommend everyone approaches that situation, is choose your staff and choose your business over sometimes your clients.
Yeah.
And that has to happen.
And she's still with us.
And she's still with you, right?
She's still with us. And she absolutely loves, like, Pearl does all her treatment. She loves Pearl. She listens to what Pearl says. At first, she was like, man, Pearl even had that, like, oh man, like, I don't feel like she's really going to listen to me. But then Pearl took on that role because I gave Pearl that role. And I think that if I would have been there and been like, Pearl, did you say this to her? And micromanaged Pearl, they would never have that same relationship, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense, right? It's showing, and I think this is where we'll, boil this podcast how to do is, like, it's faith in your staff. Like, speak about the development of them, because you have the Arizona event, you're watching Bob Proctor videos with your team. The way that I love that you've done it is you started with the team from the beginning. And if anyone here has been in business for at least a year, there's a lot of chaos because you're figuring out who you are, you're figuring out your brand, you're figuring out your services, you're adding on services, you're switching locations, right? There's a lot of change that's happening. And so for you, a lot of your staff has been able to kind of start with you, your first person start with you in the beginning of that journey. So over these last couple of years, what are ways that you have specifically developed them? Like, how are you developing your staff?
I went through a lot of bad stuff before I have the team that I have now. Like these girls, Pearl's been with me a little over a year. Jazz has been with me about 8 months. And then Kaylin just a couple months, 3 or 4 months. So I feel like I finally have my team. I went through a lot of bad apples before that. And I think I was just, whoever I would get, like I just needed a body. And then when I realized Pearl was my first amazing employee. And so once I got her, I was like, okay, you really have to hire long term, right? I didn't just want a warm body in there, but at first it was just warm bodies. And I think developing them came from developing me. Being a business owner is not easy. So when I realized like I had to emotionally figure out to stay calm, that's when I started doing the Bob Proctor stuff and the self-motivation and everything else. So I think in turn, whatever I'm learning about myself, I'm actually just sharing with them.
There's 2 things I see happen there, right? The first thing is, if you want your team to become a leader and you want them to follow and you want them to learn from you, it just take them on your learning journey, right?
That's all I've done with them. And they don't realize it. It
has to also make it easier to pivot fast because because I think the issue that happens with staff when we don't expose them to how difficult business is, all the things that you have to learn as an owner to go through it, they're just looking at it as any other business. And so then when you try and make changes or, hey, we have to change our pricing here or we have to start tracking this or we have to do this differently, they can be very resistant to it because they don't get the background.
I'm very transparent with them. I don't think a lot of business owners are transparent. They see all the numbers.
Yep.
They know. They know like, oh my gosh, like we need this much money to break even. They see them all. We go over our numbers. I think a lot of people hide it from them because they're like, oh, I don't want them to know that I make this much money. My staff sees it. And I think that's a big difference too.
Yeah. How would you give someone advice on that transparency? How do you trust sharing those difficult things and even sometimes the financial numbers with your team?
Just do it and watch how they open up. And it doesn't mean like once you get to a certain number, maybe you don't share everything. And you don't have to share everything, but you have to share enough. Like even I bonus them off of how much we make, right? And I didn't realize that until they actually started doing the meetings and showing the numbers that they were like, they didn't realize how much we actually made. So they had an idea because they had an idea of what their bonus was going to be. But now it makes them strive for more because they can see where we're at. They see the numbers on a weekly basis and they know what their bonus is going to be from there. But it also just empowers them. It's like the business kind of becomes theirs in a way too. For example, just the other day, we got some new machines. And they weren't supposed to take out this huge chunk of money. It was supposed to come after, like, they financed the machines, and then the chunk of money was supposed to come out. And one day when we were, like, successful, I screenshotted the bank account because I was like, holy shit, we have no money now. Like, what are we going to do? And they felt it, but I stayed calm. So the girls knew what was happening to the point where I didn't tell them, like, how broke we were.
Yep.
But they're like, just stay positive. Like, they were positive because I was positive, but I think they wouldn't. That comes from transparency at the same time.
Yeah. That has to bring a lot of peace to you.
Oh.
And I think that comes from like the sports background too, but like knowing you're not alone.
Yeah.
And you have your staff that's there to push, right, for you. That's got to bring a lot of peace.
Oh, 100%. Like, even when feel like I'm going to lose it, but they're like, it's okay, stay positive, we have to manifest it. Yeah. And they'll say stuff sometimes. Like, there was a lady that we hadn't seen in a long time, and they mentioned it like a day before, and literally, we don't have drop-ins. It's usually by appointment only. This lady walks in the door, and Jasmine was like, and I was like, literally, we just talked about you the other day. She was like, is that why she looked like she saw a ghost? And I was like, yes, because sometimes they'll say stuff, and it just speaks it into existence.
Man.
And I think it just shows the positivity of the culture that we've created.
And if anyone out here has doubt about doing this and being transparent, developing your team, I want to kind of shed some light on why I think it makes such a difference. So when we had our first consult, right, I came to the location and your staff was present for the consult. Normally, I hate when that happens. And
really?
The reason I hate when that happens is when people have staff on consults because usually the staff is pretty checked out, right? They're in a resistant mode. They're not looking for change. They're not looking for how do I add more work on my plate, or oh my God, I have to call leads now, or we're going to have these sales appointments coming in. Now we have more work. Like usually there's a little bit of pushback from staff. And it was really eye-opening with you there and doing it with your staff present. and seeing them engage and give into like details, give into strategy of like, hey, this worked before, we could do this, or she pulled up all the numbers and hey, we're tracking this and here's our goals. And I was like, holy crap, this is what a team is supposed to look like, right? They help the owner make decisions. And it was really interesting to see that in action, because at first I was very skeptical. I was like, I don't think this is going to be a good fit. Like, maybe this is not going to be good having them here for this consult. We should probably go to a private room. And
you said that, and I was like, no, here's fine. And you're like, I didn't even think about it.
And so like in my head, I'm like, oh man, I'm a little concerned here. But then seeing them help you, not just, with, hey, this is what we've done, here's how everything's working, but seeing them help you even with the strategy and even like how you brought them on the decision, right? Like, hey guys, do we do this? What do you think? Right? And then them actually having real input in there. It's like, that's the evolution of what happens when you actually develop your staff and bring them into the fold. It's really cool, because I think a lot of times with brick and mortar businesses, right, because we're not hiring, 6-figure C-suite employees, a lot of people just believe that just because you're hiring someone who may be younger and it's not a salary, corporate job, they don't have the skill set for those conversations.
Oh yeah.
But I think you're living proof that that's not the case.
No, and I think that even if they're gonna leave one day, like you want them to leave. It's almost like the biggest compliment, right, that you could have. I heard Eddie Wilson one time say that on the podcast. It's like, you put all this time and effort, and as a business owner, you're like, I developed them, I did all this, and I can't believe they're just gonna go leave me. And he was like, it took me a while, but the biggest compliment I could ever get was they actually left me for a better position.
Yes.
Or they want to do more with their life.
Yeah.
And so I think that they're an investment to me. And once you think that they're not just a number, like, I want to do better so I can pay them better. I want to do better so that I can bonus them. I still haven't made a paycheck off my business, and they know that. They value that at the same time.
That's so awesome. We have a similar saying at our company where it's like, I just want them to leave better. That's it. Like, can you go out and get a better job? Do you have a skill set that we worked on that made you, better to the marketplace? And if that's happening and you leave, then
I'm excited. Yeah.
We
I'm going to be sad, but I'm going to be excited at the same time. It's funny, actually, when you guys left, they were like, we like them. Because it's true. I mean, we've had people come in, we've tried influence, we've tried everything, and you can tell how, like, they're not receptive. And if they're not receptive to something, either you have to change their mindset, or maybe they're not receptive for a reason, right?
Yep.
But as soon as you guys left, they're like, I like them. They're part of all my decisions. And if you watch me, I was like, what do you guys think? Like, I try to bring them, include them on everything. So it just they feel more of a self-worth.
So tough conversation is always firing people. And you just said something a moment back that I loved, because you're, especially early on in business, I have seen people keep people for years. But you, early on, even in the beginning, knew that you needed to let some people go to find the right people.
Yeah.
What are you, like, when you're making that decision, what are you looking at?
Really, their willingness to learn. I think that's huge.
Yes.
If you have pushback from somebody right away, or their attitude, then it's not going to work. Again, you want them to be able to follow you as the leader, and doesn't mean that I'm making all the right decisions, but if they can't even learn from the very beginning. I kept one girl on, called her my dull crayon, because she just wasn't the brightest crayon in the box, but I just felt so bad for her, and so I kept her on way too long. It was true. Like, it's not the best. I mean, you probably shouldn't put that on the podcast, but everybody knew. I was like, oh, this dull crayon. And I kept her, and I continued to keep her, and then I cut her hours, and then I kept her again, and then it actually decreased the morale. Yes. And my staff saw it, and that's when I was like, I had to let her go, because it was like, she's not bringing anything to the team. They get a team bonus, and it was like she was actually pulling them down. And I think that you can easily hire one person, and it can completely change the entire culture of your organization. So now I'll know in like 2 to 3 weeks. And if they're not, I give them like a 1-month grace period. Let's try to learn. And if after 1 month, if they're not there, or even before that, I will let them go. Because then you don't get emotionally involved in them either, right? And I think that's what happened with that girl. I was like, man, I feel bad. Like, I wanted to help her. I wanted to change her. And now it's like, you know what? If you're not bringing value to my business, and my staff you're not bringing value to my staff either, you got to let them go early.
And I think my litmus test for that has been asking myself the question, am I trying to save this person? Because what I've realized is that when you're in that mindset of trying to save someone, especially when it's a staff member, one, it hurts your other staff, as you just mentioned. And I wish people like truly understand how important this is. Like, A players do not like to work with B players. You see it on sports teams all the time, right? Like, if you're someone who is like, you're there, you're showing up to practice, you're hustling, like you're putting in the work, you do not like to work with someone who is half-assing it.
I do think B players can become A players, though.
I do.
I don't think C players can, but I think B players can.
Yeah, but they have to have that willingness to learn, right? Like, it's not that they can necessarily be. Sometimes you put the right person where they just need experience, and I think that's really what it is. Like, they just haven't. They're not at that stage of their journey yet. Yeah. Like, and you meet people like that all the time. They're young. They're hustlers. You're like 10 years from now, like you're probably gonna be doing something big, right? And so it's finding that right. But like the people who don't want to learn. Right, and I guess I wouldn't even call that a B player, right? I call that a C player or less. Those are the people that would drag down an entire team. And I've seen it time and time again, and it's crazy because you make the decision to let that person go. It's insane to see the difference in the next day in the team. You just feel this different energy. You feel like a relief, and you're like, okay, I made the right decision.
We actually had an opportunity to hire a girl. She's a great salesperson, can kill it in sales, awesome. But her energy, like, she would walk in and like Jasmine's like my most easygoing. Like, I felt Jasmine do this, right?
Yeah.
And somebody was like, you need to hire her. She could kill it in sales for you. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to, because I knew that her being there would change my entire culture of what I had built, because she takes it on. She's very emotional. She's very anxious. And while she might be a great salesperson, my 3 other employees would have completely suffered, and I knew that. They knew that too. And so I think by me not hiring her, even though she was a great salesperson, I feel like they respected me.
Is there something in your interview process where you feel like you've gotten better at identifying it before you're hiring for it?
We started to do like personality tests and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Pearl actually is like my inner voice sometimes. She'll be like, no. And I'm like, okay, Pearl, just be negative. She's like, no. And every time she said no and I've hired them, it really was a no. So I rely on my staff now, I would say. But personality tests do help because it shows you where they're at, what their loyalty is. I think at the end of the day, it comes with my core values. If your core values don't align with their core values, it'll never add up. I'm an extremely hard worker. If somebody's lazy, that is like my one switch where I will get pissed pretty quickly, because I'm like, you don't have to ask me to do something. If I see the trash is full, I'm going to empty the trash, but not everybody's like that. And honesty is obviously a core value. Hard work is a core value. And so if you can tell pretty easily when you ask the right questions, if they don't align, then it'll never work.
So many good things there. Like, number one, values over skill set, right? Because like you said, a B player can become an A player, right? If they meet the values and you see that they have that ethic. Because if so, then perfect. They learn, they get around people, they'll get the skill set. I think it's the biggest thing. The other thing that I just love that you just said, because I have rarely see this, you bring your team in on the decision. You ask them what they think about the person. And so are they meeting this person in the interview process, or are you going to them like, hey, I interviewed this person, here's what I think about them, like, what do you think? You know, how are you bringing them in on that decision?
Oh, they meet them day one. So like I said, I kind of started with Pearl, and then we had every single person, Pearl and I would meet at the same time, where they would just say hi to them, even if they weren't in the entire interview process. And we had Jasmine came in for an interview, and it was somebody else. It was an older lady, kind of more mature, and I was like, we brought her back for a working interview. And Pearl was like, I really like Jasmine. I'm like, really? You really liked her? She was like, yeah, I really liked her. Like, I think that she would be really good. And so we tried the working interview with the other girl. We're like, she's not the one. And then we brought Jasmine in, and Pearl liked her, and now they have such a good relationship. They really are truly like best friends, I would say.
You just said something there, working interview. Describe that. Like, what do you mean by working interview?
Well, it's really came from the Icun, because the Icun you have to use 2 hands, and I realize that people aren't ambidextrous. If they can't do it initially, you can tell who's going to be able to learn and who's not going to be able to learn. And so that was my, like, I can't spend the time developing this person if they can't do even the Icun treatment. And some people are very analytical, and I didn't realize how much their analyticalness affected, because you have to follow a chart, and it's to me it's a very easy machine, but some people are like, okay, I have to follow this line, when you're really trying to sculpt the body, so you follow it but not to a T. So you can kind of see their personality come out, or you can see if they're going to get frustrated very easily. You can see if they're like, I don't understand. You can see their nervousness. You can see a lot about them pretty quickly.
I hope even just from this, like, people are going to get a ton of value from how do we look at staff? How do we develop them? Truly having a real interview process, because I've seen time and time again where they just hire bodies.
I did it.
Right? Like they're just like,
100%.
This person looks good. How's the pulse? Like you're hired. Or I know you from a friend.
That's the worst decision to make.
Well, I've seen it.
Worst. One time I hired her, but I knew her daughter. If you could just tell her not to come around during business hours because it's just a small space, her daughter went off on me. Like, I can't believe you treat me like this. But I'm like, I'm not saying don't come. It can be very loud very quickly.
This is the reality of owning a small brick and mortar business. We're not opening up and we have an HR person that's funneling us 100 applications. I think this is one of the foundations that people struggle to get right, right? Usually it's just a lack of resources, but I think you're proof that you can be creative and you can still make a great hiring process. You can still care about your core values in the beginning and you can develop your team. It's so funny because like I know you mentioned you guys are kind of just getting in that viability stage, but you spent the time to build something that now when you start pumping more traffic into it, you start more service, different packages. When those things start to happen, it's not going to break.
No,
because you have
a
solid team in place. And a lot of people do the opposite, where they're so focused on, let me go out and chase business. Let me go out and make these sales. Let me build the brand around myself. And they do that. But then you reach this breaking point where you're like, the service is dropping. We don't have other people that can sell. We have our expenses higher now, so we have to keep it going. And so I think that's where people get trapped in that prison of business because you don't really have another choice. And then it's so tough when you're busy to then try and start thinking about, man, how do I develop this staff member? How do we have better meetings? You know, I can't let go of this person now because
I'm in too deep. I have nobody else.
Yeah, who's going to work my front desk? And so you feel like you're trapped, and it's a really tough place to be in. And then unfortunately, what happens, and we see this all the time with clients we work with. My analogy for it is like it's like performing open heart surgery on someone while they're awake. And that's what you have to do with the business. And I've made that mistake. You know, I've gone in business to 7 figures and we're like, holy crap, we need to fix our operations. And we need to probably fire half of our staff and hire new people. And so what happens though is like now it's like a very, very tough period of where you're performing open heart surgery in the business while it's still alive and active. And you can still fix it. So like if you are in that position and you do find yourself where, you know, you have high expenses, you have revenue covering it, but you have the wrong staff in place, you have the wrong operation systems in place, I promise you there's still a way out. But if you are watching this and you're new and you're just getting started, I think following the process that you followed is the way to go.
I think once you find the right staff, you immediately start developing them.
Yes.
It might be a struggle until then, but just don't give up. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to belief. Even as a business owner, you have to truly believe that you can do it. You have to truly believe that like you are going to make revenue one day, not just be like, I'm going to do it.
Yep.
You can say it, but you can't really feel the emotion. Once you feel it and believe it, your staff will believe it too.
Yeah.
So we've been really slow the last couple months, but it's just, I think that I've developed a belief in them where they are like, it's going to be fine. Because I've developed that belief in them, they know it's fine. Like, I feel like we're right to our breaking point. Like, we're right there. We need good marketing. We do have organic marketing too from our website. And she actually did a call. I just had a call with her the other day, but she secret shopped us. And she was like, I am so proud. She's like, they called me back within 15 minutes. I told them I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. They called me the very next day. They text me, never pressured me. 2 days later, I got a follow-up call again. And because we've been slow, I think you need to take the slow time to develop your staff even more. Yes. And instead of stressing and being like, oh my gosh, why aren't you guys doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Instead, work on developing them, right? You're slow for a reason. Sometimes shit happens for a reason. And so we've actually worked on our process. Okay, let's call them back. They don't like the pushy sales. I don't like pushy sales. Let's develop a process where we all get along, right?
Yep.
So it filled my heart with joy when she was like, they killed it. And I was like, and it was because we developed in the slow time.
I have to make the statement because if you have not done so already, it costs you nothing. Have your mom, have your sister, your friend, whatever it is, have someone secret shop your business. Have them go to your webpage, have them opt in, and just see what happens. Don't give them expectations. Let them come back and report to you. But like that can be some of the biggest eye openers in your business. That could be the breaking point of where like you need to fix some things. And don't
be mad at your staff.
Yeah. Because it's your fault.
Your fault. Yeah, and that's what I realized. I was like, you know what? Like, a lot of this stuff, because I'm a visionary. That's That is my brain. Like, right? I work in the ER. I love organized chaos. But I realize that they don't like organized chaos. They don't know what's going on in my brain. Yeah. It's me failing as a leader. If they're not calling these leads back, it's because I haven't told them to call these leads back. You don't have to tell me innately. I'm going to do it. But not everybody works that way. Some people like structure. And what I did, actually, this is another thing I've done, in order to develop structure without micromanaging them, because I'm like, man, I don't want to tell you what you have to do every single week, and how are you guys going to go and learn and teach other people? I was like, why don't you write me a list of what you're going to do every single week? And so now they're like, I'm going to learn about exosomes. I'm going to learn about BPC. I'm going to do this. And so now they'll study on their own, but it doesn't mean that I'm not in control. So they still feel like there's structure, but also that they're doing it on their own. And so that way they can go and lead somebody else.
And how much more ownership do you see on that versus giving someone a checklist and saying,
100% more ownership.
Right?
100%. Yeah.
Right.
I love what they just come up with now. And they you'll see them watching videos, or like Pearl, I took Pearl to the conference. Mm-hmm. Now she's going to put slides together and she's going to teach them. So I don't want to teach them. Pearl, I want you to teach them.
I love that so much. And
it's fun.
That ownership. Yeah, it is fun.
What stresses me out is if I can't bonus them and I can't pay them. That actually, I don't even care if I sometimes ever make a paycheck, but if I can't pay them, they have to feed their family. They have to feed their kids. They have a paycheck. So I think that's actually sometimes more exciting.
Yeah, I think it's that concept of leaders eat last. But the funny part about it is every time I have seen that in true action, what ends up happening though is that it starts to blow up. And it blows up in a good way, right? There's still going to be problems, going to be chaos, right? You might have to let someone go when you reach a certain level. There's things that happen. Mm-hmm. But I just find that it works better long term when you have that mentality with your team. Don't get a big head here. Keep working hard. But I have been on consults before with someone that's been in business for 13 years, and they can't tell me any stats. They can't tell me what exact revenue was. I'll get ranges in 10 to 15,000 to where it's I think we did 100K last month, or it might have been 120. I'm 20, I mean, most businesses, brick and mortar, are 20% margins. So I'm so that 20K, that's either you're profitable or not profitable. Why don't you know that number? At the consult, you guys had pulled up a sheet where you had your rocks, hey, this is what's being worked on right now, next 90 days goals. You guys were able to tell me how many DAOs happened over the last month, how many leads came in. There was true KPI tracking happening in your business. Where did that come from? When did you get your team to start looking at those things? Talking about the KPI tracking. For people that understand KPIs, key performance indicators.
I think I just realized that's my weakness. So that's when I brought in, I'm part of that mastermind called Money Is.
Yep.
They have one called Empire, which Eddie Wilson is a part of. He's exited millions of businesses. I don't know how many, but
shout out to Eddie Wilson.
Yeah, shout out to Eddie Wilson. That's when I was okay, I need them to come in. So they came in, and I don't think that I think as business owners, we always just oh, I know everything. I don't know everything, right? And why reinvent the wheel? And then they showed us the key performance, what to track, and then they talked about your brick. They talk about Foot Locker. Foot Locker's a good example of when they weren't making any sales, they weren't doing anything. And so instead they focused on measuring people's feet. And they're just measure people's feet. Don't talk about shoes, don't talk about sales. I just want every single time they come in, I want you to measure people's feet. And so they just realized that their sales skyrocketed. So when they came in, we figured out our brick is custom packages. Let's focus on our custom packages. Let's go over what are my core values? Do they align with the girls' core values? And they were all involved in all of this. So they've seen everything go. And I think that made a huge difference. You have to realize your weaknesses. You have to know who you are as a business owner. You have to learn your weaknesses in order to make them a strength.
So there's this concept of debt in business, right? We're all familiar with it. If you've opened up a MedSpa, we all know financing the $100,000 machine. We understand that debt. And we understand the importance of taking on that debt sometimes, right? It's an investment into your business. But a lot of times what people don't realize is there's other debt that is not actually financial debt in your business. Debt, for example, operational debt. Every month you go by and you don't have a KPI tracking system in place, there's a debt that's building there that's going to come back and bite you in the butt down in the future when you're not developing your staff. If you don't have the right staff, if you don't have an interview process, there's operational debt that's happening there. And either it gets fixed now, or has to get fixed when it's even harder in the future when you have more clients and more revenue. And so I think taking that time to assess yourself and where are you weak as an entrepreneur, right? Because you may be the opposite to where you're really good at financials, but you're really bad at vision for your business and sales process and things like that. Or you may be someone coming from the medical field. We see this a lot, where you're really good at the medicine. you're really tactical, you're detail, but you're terrible at client experience and things like that. So I think it's in those slow moments, right? If you're not seeing 4 consults plus per day, you're not completely slammed. It's what do you do at that time?
Yeah.
And I think that is, especially in the early phase, when you have a little bit more time because you have less business, that's where you can use that time wisely to focus on those things.
I think I've bled a lot of money on that stuff. Like I've done a lot of self-growth this past year, gone to tons of conferences, and people always think, oh, she's out of town again. I'm like, no, and Pearl, watch. Like when you come to this conference with me, it's 8 to 6, and then you're going to network. It's work at the end of the day. I bled a lot of money for Empire. I bled a lot of money just developing my staff or not cutting their hours, because I think that puts that fear in them. At one time, like, then they weren't calling back leads, and I wanted to throw that, like, you guys don't call back leads, like I'm gonna pull it. But instead it was like trying to develop them, don't cut hours, because that puts that fear. And once they have that fear, then they're not going to perform as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, you cut someone's hours, we know they're on Indeed looking for
they're looking for another job, and I'm like, they're really good staff. So don't put that fear in them. Instead, let's grow and let's figure out what we can do, how they can utilize their time. And that's kind of what the whole, like, what are you guys going to learn this week? Because if we're slow, don't be like, it's not their fault. Like when I worked for that neurosurgeon, he'd be like, we're slow. Like, what are they doing? Like, what do you want to do? Go kick somebody in the back so we can do surgery on them? Like, that's not my responsibility. When they're there, I'm going to perform. But it's like, instead, invest into me, how I can perform better. Or maybe I go do online training. Or how else could he have helped me to grow, instead of just making me feel like a bad person. But it wasn't my fault. You know, it came from the top.
It's just cool to see what you have. You have 3 great A players. You have an amazing vision. And you've really done the work, right, of how do you be a better entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot more work to do. There always is.
Always
right? Every
is.
single level, there's more work. There's more problems. But what are you excited about now?
So we're trying to reorganize our space.
Yep.
It's too small. And they're like, just if you go one word machine, like we have to outgrow. So yesterday we were looking at how are we going to reorganize this, right? And I'm like, I think that we get a chair, blah, blah, blah. And Pearl was like, we don't have to get chairs everywhere. We're going to be out of here in 6 months. So to hear her say that, I was like, you're right. We're going to be out of here in 6 months.
Wow.
So I think it's just getting that revenue up to the place where we can get a new space. Like, we've totally outgrown our space now. And Pearl even was like, she was like, when I first started here, she just had a red light and iCoon. And then we got a laser. And then we got the M-Sculpt. And then we got the balancer. And now we have these machines. So she's seen the growth. And it's fun to see that, like, she's excited for the growth, and she's excited that, like, in 6 months from now, we're going to be in a new space. So don't waste your money on that. And it's fun, too, because I'm cheap at heart. And when I look back, I'm like, maybe I should have done it different. Like, everybody's seen my business change, because now I'm like, okay, brand, you want to stay within the brand track. And I see the importance of that because of all the conferences I've been going to and I've learned. But I was like, oh, maybe we should buy a towel warmer. And they're like, no, we don't need a towel warmer. So now they know that my cheapness at the same time, and they're like, no, we don't need that. We're going to be in another space soon. Like, we need this. And so it's fun to see them say stuff like that too.
You see the fruits of that development.
Yeah.
I think I figured out the title of this podcast, which is Permission to Grow. And the reason why I say that is because so many times we have this, I don't know if it's entitlement or whatever it is, but for some reason, an entrepreneur thinks that because they open up their business, they are now able to go out and just get clients. They can hire the marketing agency, get the leads, and just grow like crazy. But if they haven't actually done the work, if they haven't started to figure out, do I know my numbers? Is my staff prepared? How's our service? Can we get people results? You know, if they haven't looked at those things, I don't think that they have permission to grow yet. And the marketplace tells them that, because what always happens is they do it and then it doesn't work. And then they're like, Facebook leads suck, or marketing doesn't work, or it's my area, right? My area is bad. And so they start kind of playing that blame game there. But I think when you put the attention on those things, like where you're at right now, and you have a staff member that's seeing the vision of like, hey, we're going to be in a new location in 6 months, I think you've arrived at a place where it's like you deserve the new business.
Yeah.
And I think the marketplace, the world, like that's whatever you believe in, it rewards those who are prepared for it. Because if you're not prepared for it, why do you think you're going to get, 20 new clients tomorrow?
Yeah.
If you're not prepared for actually truly taking care of those people and taking care of your staff. So it's really cool to hear that and just like hear your energy and just see kind of behind the scenes and hear from them, my team that, did the custom ad shoot for you yesterday. And I really do believe it's like you're at a place where it's time to focus on let's get bodies in the door and let's
Yeah.
grow.
I do truly, and the girls see that too. And so it is exciting. I think at the end of the day, you have to know yourself, right?
Yeah.
If you don't know yourself as a business owner, you can't implement anything, right? I know I'm not good at processes. If I'm like, I'm great at processes, or I'm great at this, we would never be where we're at right now. So I think knowing your strength and knowing your weaknesses, and I think a lot of people are too prideful. They're too prideful to say, I'm not good at this. Like, I have to ask for help. Ask for help. You're not too good to ask for help. You don't know it all. Like, especially starting a business, like, there's lots of things I'm still missing. Tons. So if you grow yourself, I think your business will grow.
I'm going to take you back to college. You see Jenessa back in college, struggling with confidence. What wisdom would you give yourself?
I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately. Funny you say that. To let go of your self-limiting beliefs. I always put this, I was never going to be a superstar. I can't be a superstar. Like, I'll take a back seat. And so it was my self-limiting belief to be like, shit, I can do this. You watch everybody else be superstars, and you're like, oh, man, I can't do that. So, like, I would freeze at the free throw line. When really it was like, if you let go of that self-limiting belief and just know that you can do it, but truly believe it, it's different than saying, like, oh, I'm going to make this free throw versus, like, envisioning it. And I think that's what I always had a hard time doing, was envisioning my future. And again, Bob Proctor said, whatever you can hold in your head, you can hold in your hand. But think about what you want. Don't just do it just because. But if you truly take the time to realize, like, who you are as a person and what you want to do, that's when I think your vision starts to become a reality.
Self-awareness.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's because to understand that, your limiting beliefs, right? You have to know yourself. You have to know yourself.
But you grow up being like, oh, my dad told me that, you know, I should be this. My mom told me I should be this. And there's sometimes paradigms in our brains that we don't even realize that we've inherited way down the line that is just embedded into our thoughts and our subconscious. And so it's taken me at the age of almost 39 to really realize who I am as a person and what I do want, not what somebody told me or what I couldn't do. Or, you know, you tell somebody your vision and they automatically shoot it down. They say as kids the biggest thing that we have is dreaming, right?
Yes.
And as soon as your parent would tell you, like, I'm going to be in the NBA, what did we first tell them? No, let's pick a different career.
Yep.
But, like, it's the Kobe Bryant, it's the Steph Curry, it's Michael Jordan, who they envisioned what they wanted a long time ago. And I think that's what makes them such good people, because their self-limiting belief was never there, because they had the vision. And it doesn't matter. Somebody in their life said, you're right, baby, you can't do that. You are going to be that person, instead of being like, no, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
So
I think that brings us full circle to the beginning of this conversation of why you can take a team, have A players that can help you grow your business, is because you're also doing that for them, right? You're being that voice that's speaking to them of like, hey, I see your potential. Here's what we got to grow in. Here's what we need to fix, but I see your potential.
Yeah.
And I think when you have that voice and you have that affirmation coming from someone that's a leader in your life, that changes the game. You have reaffirmed my belief that over the last decade of being in business is a game of personal development. That's really what it is, because the information is out there.
Yeah.
You can go on ChatGPT right now and ask how to figure out your lifetime value. It can give you all the stats, everything you need to track KPIs wise, but it's a game of personal development, right?
yeah, and if you don't have revenue, you don't have a business, right?
Yep.
But who brings revenue? Your employees. Your employees bring revenue. Because as a business owner, if you want to be stuck in a business, yeah, you can bring revenue all day long. But your employees are who bring revenue, and with revenue, you have a business. With revenue, I can hire the CEO that I want to for $600,000.
Yep.
But without revenue, I don't have anything.
I love your vision.
So,
I really do.
thanks.
You see it. It is like, it is there. You feel it. You see it.
I do. I'm
And,
excited.
Man. Well, thank you so much for this. I do think we need to do another one.
Yeah.
We need to have you back on in like 3 months. And
For
let's
sure.
let's get the update on the journey.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Oh, I'd love to.
Are you switching over branding to Ageless?
No, I think we're going to stick with Frisco Body Contouring,
Okay.
but my track is what they say. Like I told you, I've listed a lot of Andrew Cordell and Eddie Wilson, but he talks about your track, right? Where Bud Light he used for is a great example, right? Bud Light is Bud Light, right? If
Yep.
they're going to be like, hey, let's make a rosé, it doesn't make sense. Ageless is just ageless naturally is where I just want to keep it.
There we go.
I want to keep it in there. So it might be like a little tagline hashtag.
which I love. Yeah, I can't wait to see the ad copy. That I wrote all new scripts, ad copy and stuff for it.
I love that you put ageless in everything.
Yeah. I was like, so I love it. I think it's perfect.
Yeah.
So where can people kind of find you if they want to see? Because you guys do some fun stuff on social media too. I think it'd be a great example for people to kind of see.
It's friscobodycontouring.com is our website. Pretty easy. And then frisco.body.contouring is our Instagram.
I highly recommend you check it out because it will kind of show you getting your team more creative, giving them the reins, right?
Yeah.
Like letting them have some fun with it.
Yeah, there's a really funny video that they did, and I was at a conference again, of course, and then all of a sudden they send me this video, and it's the three of them. They were mimicking somebody on social media, and they're like, come see your favorite trio at Frisco Body Contouring. And I showed somebody like, your staff has way too much time on their hands. But I thought it was hilarious. I'm showing everybody. I'm like, look at this one. So it's fun to see that their creative personality come through too.
Amen to that. Jenessa, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Guys, another episode of the Wellness Business Secrets podcast. I know you got a lot of value from that. And so if you are, whether you're just getting started or maybe you have the business that's been built up and you're dealing with some operational struggles, take some tips from this. Go back and rewatch it, right? Like take the notes on how you develop your team, your hiring process, tracking KPIs. All those things are important, but I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is how are you developing yourself so you can pour that into your leadership skills with developing your team. So as always, as my only ask for you is we love making specific content for you, the wellness business owner. So if you enjoy this content, if you want more behind the scenes action, if you want to have more people come on and share the reality of what it looks like to own a brick and mortar wellness business, then just subscribe. All right, subscribe, let us know you're there, drop us a comment, and if you're feeling extra special today, go ahead and leave a review. Until the next one, guys, we'll see you later.